Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins, and live from the cubicle back in Nashville. Drew, we had a heck of a day, 3-hour show, Transfer Portal Palooza, 247sports.com. A lot happening in the transfer portal world, a lot happening in the college football recruiting world as well. Drew, I felt like the spring portal window was kind of like, it was kind of put on this pedestal of like, hey, it's going to be really busy. It's going to be one of those where you got to be careful in terms of what could happen to your team. Day one, there wasn't a lot of it, in terms of what we saw. Caden Proctor, obviously the biggest name to enter the portal. We've known that for quite some time. Cormani McClain yesterday entered the portal, the former 5-star. We'll talk about him later in the show. Handful of other names, Nigel Lee Kelly, you think about as well, Tyler Williams, former top 247 receiver. So some really talented players and a lot of guys trying to find a new home and maybe more access to playing time immediately. But Drew, overall, just your takeaways on yesterday. And I should mention that, we got another 2 weeks, right? And there's going to be a slow trickle. Less than half of the FBS programs or Power 4 programs have completed spring practices in their spring game. So some time to go, obviously, for names to continue to filter into the portal. But Drew, just overall, your thoughts kind of on what we saw yesterday.
Well, I think you covered it all in your opening monologue there. I mean, I was going to bring up the fact that there's a ton of spring games this weekend. We got more spring games the following weekend, and it would be weird for some of these kids to enter the transfer portal before they've gone through that spring game. Number one, you want the film, right? And then some of these kids, I know we don't talk about school a lot, but if you enter the transfer portal, some of these programs will just pull you right out of any academic support. And at the end of the day, you got to pass your class, so you have that transcript to move somewhere else. So you're right. Day one started off slow, but some big names entered, and it's a lot of former high-profile recruits where maybe they need a restart. So that's kind of my reaction. Talking with some college personnel. I was driving back from Fort Lauderdale to Orlando this morning, just exchanging some messages. Common theme I got is you would not believe some of the numbers being thrown around out there. That came up a lot. And then just a lot of, we're in kind of wait and see mode, right? Think more guys are going to enter here. And, really, I think anyone who is shopping is looking for kind of depth pieces, right? Someone that could be the back end rotational pass rusher, another corner in case a guy goes down. It seems like everyone wants a game-changing, game-breaking wide receiver. That's another one out there. So those are my quick thoughts. I also want to give you a shout out, man. Hey, you hosted a 3-hour show. I was proud of you, man. I was sitting in the control room. You have no media background, right? You were building Washington's roster, helping out at Michigan and Alabama not too long ago. Now you're up here just holding court with the earpiece in. So that was it was impressive, man. I'm happy for you.
Appreciate you, buddy. Yeah, there's a newfound respect for like the Emily Prouds of the world and Josh Pate. I texted both of them after the show and was like, I don't know how you do it. The biggest thing for me was just kind of like 3 hours. There's no commercial breaks because the whole thing streams on YouTube. I went to the restroom at like 8:45. The show started at 9, and then like 9:30, I was like, man, I got to go back. So just fighting some demons there for the next 2 hours and 15 minutes. But
well, Scott Hansen, man, we went to a Greek restaurant on Monday night. I think he's got that strict diet, very heavy on the salt, so you don't, you absorb all the water. Next year, we'll get that playbook out for you.
I know. We got to get a nutritionist here at 24/7 Sports to help us out with that. Well, we've been talking a lot about the portal, right? But it doesn't mean high school recruiting has stopped. And I feel like you and I haven't really talked high school recruiting in about a week. It seems like that. And a lot has happened. And it's one of those things that I feel like everybody has their eyes on the portal. And if you're not careful, there are a lot of things that have transpired this month, in particular in April, that are really important to the future of a lot of programs, right? And let's start at the top. How about top 247 quarterback Hassan Longstreet, number 28 player in the country, number 5 arm overall. He commits to Texas A&M. You and I have talked about Longstreet for a long time. He's one of those guys that was going to be the domino that kind of got things going on the quarterback trail. And we saw this with Matt Zollers as well. You fast forward a couple weeks, all of a sudden Zollers is off the board in Missouri, right? You got Longstreet off the board at Texas A&M, and you got Ryan Montgomery, who we'll talk about here in just a few minutes, top 247 quarterback. He's coming off the board today at 3 o'clock Eastern time on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. But Drew, this is one that I feel like not a lot of people have really talked about a lot for, I'm not sure the reasons, quite honestly, but Longstreet is one of our favorite guys between us that I think we're really excited about. And this is like, you look at Mike Elko, and Chris Hummer brought it up yesterday on the show. Like, A&M is one of those teams. They've done a tremendous job, not only in the portal, but I really like kind of the early returns of what they're doing on the high school side of it as well.
This is, I want to see your reaction to this kind of take. But Hassan Longstreet, to me, feels like a Mike Elko quarterback. And I know Mike Elko hasn't been a head coach that long, but you look at Riley Leonard at Duke, right? This gritty guy can extend plays with his legs, can stand in there and take some hits. And I think Hassan Longstreet, to me, that he's got some of that in his game. And at Corona Centennial, last season, his team goes out to Hawaii. He mounts this huge comeback, 5 rushing touchdowns, final game of the junior season against St. John Bosco. He played good enough to win, right? Like, he had his team constantly converting those short runs. He's got some gamer to him. And I've always been searching for like a player comp, and I don't think this one is perfect. And I'm sure some people are going to be like, oh, I hate it. But like Bo Nix, I like see some Bo Nix in him in terms of like how he plays, that type of field command. And you think about, okay, everything that has happened at Texas A&M over the past few years under Jimbo Fisher, that locker room, the amount of funding that was there, the salary and whatnot. It just feels like it's going to be different under Elko. He is building out that roster in the right ways. And now he's got this quarterback that we really like. And Coop, I did his announcement on Sunday afternoon. I was hosting that. I got back from the Elite 11 in there in Orlando. And not only did he commit to Texas A&M, he committed to the All-American Bowl in San Antonio. And that's going to be an important evaluation for us. We're also going to get him at the Elite 11 finals, but huge pickup. And, did you think, okay, Mike Elko would go and get, one of the headlining quarterbacks in this class? Like, could you have pictured that 6 months ago? I don't think so. You probably would have thought it was Jimbo Fisher.
I'll say this, my biggest take from A&M, what I've seen so far, is like they have a very decisive operation when it comes to the talent identification evaluation side and understanding where their board falls. And here in spring, I did 7 commitments right now. We'll talk about Marcus Garcia in a minute, but for them to be able to stack their board, Keelan Russell was another name that came up. But to make Hassan Longstreet priority number 1, and you think about Longstreet, and we've talked about USC, maybe some flirtations with him. Obviously, Julian Lewis still committed there. Auburn has done their due diligence, had him on campus multiple times. But for A&M to have the conviction in Longstreet, even regardless of where we have him ranked, it just seems like they did the best job in making him a priority all the way through. And we talked about Landon Rink a couple of weeks ago. They've done a really good job. And, the time of the year sometimes can be tricky, but I bring up Landon Rink because, you talk to people around A&M, they know exactly what he is. Here's a guy who's going to be a serviceable player. He's going to be a program guy. He's going to be a guy that they feel like they can develop over the next 3 to 4 years. And they kind of know how those pieces fit together. And they've done a really good job, especially with players like that, players like Landon Rink. And I think they've done a good job in the portal. It's kind of reflected. So it's been a lot of buzz, a lot of talk about the importance of player personnel operations. Derek Miller, who I used to work with at LSU when we were interns together, he's been through the ringer, man. He's been a lot of places. He's been at Bowling Green. He was at Duke with Mike Elko. And he's got his hands full at Texas A&M, but they've just done a really good job. And for a program under a first-year head coach, they seem to be very much ahead of the curve and in lockstep about what type of roster they want to build. And it's not these guys, going out and, really attacking the top end of their board and working through. You kind of see them attacking it at every single level. Hey, this guy's going to be a depth piece. we have no issue taking that guy in April. Most people kind of wait and go down the process and, have a different feel for their board. So they've been super, super impressive to me about how they've gone about their business in a short amount of time.
What's the term we always use? RKGs, our kind of guys, or what is it?
OKGs.
OKGs. Yeah.
Are the word, but yeah, OKGs are kind of guys. They have that feel to them. They had it at Duke,
And then, talking to Greg Biggins, who's on the scouting team out there in California. I mean, he has been on Husan Longstreet from the jump, and just trading some text messages about him, with him about Husan. Like, I kind of like the way the kid is wired. I think he's going to fit that type of culture, understand his role, and excited to see what that marriage is going to be there in College Station. What about Marcus Garcia? They also picked up a commitment from him on Sunday. High 3-star offensive tackle for us, number 27 ranked. I think me and you and Gabe Brooks on the scouting team had an excellent conversation about him a few days ago. Monster discus numbers coming out, shot put. I think he's a swing tackle. I think he's a guy you can play on the inside, but just kind of continues the theme of what we've been alluding to, like they're building out that roster in the right way.
Yeah, Garcia is a guy who's pretty interesting. I think when you turn on the tape, I think immediately you think, all right, yeah, you could have a home at right tackle. But you and I have talked so much about that versatility, why it's important on the offensive line, that position flex. I think he could play all 5 spots on the offensive line, maybe absent of left tackle, right? But I think this is a guy that ultimately, end of the day, is going to end up moving inside. I talked to some people around the program that think he could play center. I think you and I and the rest of the scouting team are kind of flying blind on some of the measurements. We don't have that. We haven't been able to really body type him yet. But the shot and the disc are super encouraging data points. And the reason I bring that up is because that's how he plays. It's really reflective in his play style. Really good drive blocker, strong at the point of attack, can get to the second level as well. I think you can play him in a zone or power scheme. That stuff's really important when you talk about a new offensive coordinator in Colin Klein. You see what they did with Avery Johnson, right? Those offensive linemen are going to have to play at the second level, and they're going to have to play in space. I love this kid. Like the combination of a Garcia and a Rink, they might not be grabbing all the headlines right here in the middle of April, but this is a name that's like, yeah, man, 3 to 4 years from now, the guys that you can develop. And the other thing, we talk about like the resources and the investment and being able to get guys from the state of Texas that fit your program that aren't really going to cost you that much from an NIL standpoint in the first 2 years. Like, this is really smart roster building, in my opinion.
I agree.
All right. Well, the Aggies now up to number 14, like team to watch going forward there. We mentioned the other quarterback coming off the board here in just a few hours. That's top 247 quarterback Ryan Montgomery, the number 173 player in the country, number 12 quarterback from Ohio. He'll make his decision today. The crystal ball 100% on Georgia. That seems to be the way the wind is blowing. Georgia with a potential quick pivot after losing out on Matt Zollers. Florida's in there. South Carolina's in there. There's a lot of attention for Ryan Montgomery. And Drew, there's a guy you like a lot out of the state of Ohio. So I'll give you the floor here and just kind of give the rundown on the player and what you think about the potential fit in Athens.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, right, to evaluate these quarterbacks. And obviously we're in draft season right now with the NFL draft coming up next weekend. And a lot of takes out there from a lot of people I respect and trust. And I always talk about a quarterback's ability to process and read a defense. And there are times where I don't think you have the entire all the pieces to the puzzle. But for me, when I went through all these 2025 quarterbacks and the top 247, to me, I think Ryan Montgomery is one of the top processors in this group of quarterbacks. And, you look at him, 6'3", 210 pounds. Coop, we sized him up at the Future 50 back there in June. He's got an okay frame. I don't think it's anything that's going to blow you away. But you would not expect him to play in this type of offense where it's 4 and 5 wide. And that's what Ryan Montgomery does. And he can get it to all 3 levels. He's a 3-year starter there in Ohio. He broke some Ben Roethlisberger records at his high school in terms of touchdown passes. I think every year he's gotten statistically better. And I just think as a distributor, he's one of the top quarterbacks in there. I know he can run, and he's got 700 career rushing yards, I believe, 15 touchdowns over the past 3 seasons. I don't think he's really like a dual threat in any way, especially if he's going to be playing in the SEC. You know, those guys are going to be faster, but I like him in terms of what's between the ears. You know, the arm, he can throw it around. And what really stands out to me, again, that future 50. Remember they played the 7-on-7. I know 7-on-7, but you had a few other quarterbacks there. And Ryan Montgomery was the only guy that was not afraid to throw the football down the field. Everyone else was check down city. And then Ryan Montgomery was like, no, I'm going to throw that 2-ball. I'm going to challenge this safety right here. And that has always kind of been in the back of my mind. So, you know, Georgia, it would be an interesting fit, but you think about the future of that room. Ryan Puglisi last cycle, an Elite 11 finalist. Now Ryan Montgomery, a lot of Ryans there in Athens, but I can see why they want him. And to me, Billy Napier in Florida, that I like that idea of this, but how could you not go wrong with Georgia there?
Yeah, maybe more physical upside than a lot of people think too. You kind of read into him a little bit. There's a lot to like with the physical Clay. In terms of, you know, if you're a Georgia fan, you're looking at Ryan Montgomery, you're kind of saying, all right, how does he fit in our quarterback room? I'd kind of have him sandwiched right in there between Ryan Puglisi and Gunnar Stockton. I think more talented than a guy like Gunnar Stockton, not to take anything away from him. But all three of those guys are pretty much the same type of quarterback in their cerebral ability and what they bring to the table, and kind of fit what Mike Bobo wants to do schematically as well. So potentially in terms of what that would look like, I think he's a really natural fit in a Mike Bobo offense. I think the biggest thing is he a guy you win with or because of? I'd probably say win with, lean more towards that. But certainly at the end of the day, if you have the tools and the talent that Georgia has on the offensive line, the running back room, not only the tight end position and the skill position that they're trying to continue to upgrade, I think Ryan Montgomery is going to be in a really good spot.
Are there sirens in your background right now?
Yeah, we're in downtown Nashville. You must have the audio is picking everything up there. But Ryan Montgomery, like I said, 3:00 Eastern time, I believe, on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We'll have a commitment. That will be a big one. We'll wait and see what happens there, guys. You were locked into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast every Tuesday and Wednesday at noon Eastern time with our Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins, and myself. We appreciate you joining us. And if you're on that 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, if you're on X and you have a question, you can ask that question in the chat. You can also do that on YouTube as well. We'll get to that a little bit later in the show. Drew, to stick on Georgia in a very Georgia-like fashion, they got a commitment over the last week from top 247 defensive lineman Darren Kennegbong. Hopefully I got that one right. Top 100 player, number 12 defensive lineman from New Jersey. Second year they've gone to New Jersey. NAB, top 247 defensive lineman Jordan Thomas out of there last year. I kind of want to start there, Drew. It's kind of a head scratcher that, you know, I feel like Georgia just, without really a lot of pushback, has been able to go up to that part of the country. And obviously, I mean, you think about their ability to develop top-end defensive linemen, that doesn't shock you. But you're surprised, like, where's Ohio State? Where's Michigan? Where's Penn State? You know, in this second straight year, they've been able to go up there and get one of the best big bodies in that region.
I think it's talent ID. What I do think is notable, remember Fran Brown, 24/7 Sports Recruiter of the Year last cycle. He has a ton of ties to that region. He's now at Syracuse. So they get a Kennebong without, you know, kind of your ace recruiter from that area. But this is Georgia being Georgia and going around the country, identifying the high developmental upside bodies and getting them committed. And I think we had come on this show a while back when we shot him up in the rankings. He's currently sitting number 84 for us, number 12 defensive lineman. And I said it, you know, I think he's a guy that's going to rise. Just not a ton of verified third-party information on him out there. Wrestling background, young for the class. I love this kid. He's to me, and I'm not saying he's LJ McCray, but kind of like the similar Clay, the length, what you see on tape. He could put it all together, and it's going to be a skyrocket. Another guy we got in the All-American Bowl. you're right, Coop. Like Ohio State, Penn State, playing a little defense in that region. I don't know. I think the Georgia brand right now, especially if you're in that front seven, it's kind of hard to say no to the Bulldogs.
Would it make you feel better if I told you that a Kenny Bong is 6'5.5", 260 pounds with a 81-inch wingspan?
I said third party verified.
Oh, that is third party verified, Coach. So yeah, there's certainly a lot to like him about him. Big, physical, a lot of clay to mold as well. He kind of fits into what Georgia's been doing on the defensive line. Drew, another team that continues to add tight ends. How about Miami, man? Getting it done. Added top 247 tight end Brock Schott over the last week, number 135 in the top 247, number 8 tight end from Leo High School in Indiana. Two-way player, had 19 sacks last year as well. Drew, the name that kind of popped into my mind here, just on the surface, Little Lawson Lucky from Georgia. That's kind of what I felt. I mean, you can play him in line, you can split him out. Love his ability, not only at the catch point, but after the catch as well. This kind of feels like, I mean, you think about Miami's tight end room and what they've been able to do. Bring in Elijah Lofton, early returns there are really, really positive. You think about what they did even before Brock Schott with our guy Luka Gilbert, another 4-star tight end, more traditional, right? Has some developmental upside. But those two are really complementary. Mario Cristobal, he made a change at the tight end position with Cody Woodle now in that spot, and he's delivered, man. I kind of like the physical makeup of that room.
Well, what's interesting about Brock Schott, man, is I think when Gabby Urrutia from the Miami site reached out to me, you, and Alan True, he said, are they taking him on offense or defense? Because Brock Schott, the defensive tape is what you want to see. Like, he could be a top 247 edge rusher. Right now, Coop, I think you hit it on the head here. Kind of like my reaction, and we said this with the Luka Gilbert after he committed, just adding different type of weapons. But how about Miami? They were in Chicago. Now they're going into Indiana. It seems like there is no boundary for what Miami and Mario Cristobal want to do.
No, not at all. That used to, quite honestly, when I was working for Mario, it used to drive me crazy. Not so much when you were at Oregon and it's a national brand and you can go into these places, but I always felt like it was more beneficial for us to kind of stay within a certain geographical region. Now at Miami, it's pretty interesting. You mentioned, I mean, the 2 tight ends you get from the Midwest, right? Indiana and Ohio. Can you blame them? They go out, they get Justin Scott out of Illinois. They get, they get Lightfoot out of there too. I mean, they've had a ton of success the last 2 cycles.
And Mario always says this. It's like, oh, when Miami was Miami, they're pulling guys from all around the country. I'll say this. I'm based in Florida, right? Watch a lot of Florida high school football. Like, there's not tight ends that come out of this area. So not a lot of attached tight ends. So I think it's a smart play to go out of state. And I had a Power 4 assistant I trust that coaches the position. He's like, why would I come to Florida for a tight end? He's like, no one has your traditional tight, like no one is blocking. I'm going to go look somewhere else for it.
It's more like Amari Niblack, Olsen, Pat Henry type of guys, those H-back guys kind of flex out that are more versatile pass catching tight ends than they are if you're looking for traditional 12 personnel wide tight end that can give you something in the run game. So Miami continuing to get it done at the tight end position. Another tight end that came off the board, Nate Roberts from Oklahoma, top 247 tight end, the number 11 tight end at his position group. He commits to Ohio State. Drew, another guy that I really enjoyed watching, baseball background, lower level of competition there in Oklahoma. But you think about a guy that can do a lot of different things, how he fits in Ohio State's offense now with Chip Kelly there. I kind of like the fit.
Yeah. And he's a guy that I think you can kind of use in that move role, right? Leak him out, get him in space underneath routes. Had a chance to see him at the Battle Miami tournament, which was like tight end central. That you had Lincoln Cure there, Deshaun Brame there. Keoti Armstrong was there, and then you had Nate Roberts, and everyone always asks, all right, what do those events mean? I mean, just getting to see all those guys in a non-padded setting and kind of size him up, and I think where we have him ranked is probably accurate. Like I think that's where he should be right now in that day 3 range. But Ohio State, I mean, just another option for them as they continue to load up on offense.
Not to mention, got the #1 ranked class in 2025. Ohio State was like a big focal point of yesterday's transfer portal show. Kind of interesting the way that everything is going. I mean, we talked about CBA, we talked about the agency part of this, and just, I mean, it sounds more and more like the NBA, right? When you talk about the transfer portal window and how money kind of factors into this situation as well. So Ohio State getting it done on the high school level, not taking their foot off the gas pedal. Drew, another guy that popped, and another team that we talked about yesterday, Washington, Jedd Fisch, and we kind of heaped a lot of praise on Jedd Fisch, the job that he's done in Arizona, the job that he's done in a short amount of time at Washington. I don't think a lot of people are really paying attention, but they go out, they get Vines Bright, 3-star receiver by way of IMG Academy, originally from Arizona. So a lot of connections there to that Jedd Fisch staff. This is one of those, Drew, like middle of April, kind of flies under the radar. Washington, they got a lot of work to do to kind of rebuff that receiver room. I like this kid a lot. I think I said it a couple of weeks ago, but this is a really, really kind of like under radar savvy get for Washington.
I'm going to give you a flaming take here. Is this like the biggest pickup for Washington outside of a quarterback in the past 3 cycles?
Ooh. I don't know. That's saying a lot, but it's solid, very solid. Like if it, you think of like a high floor player that is going to come in and be able to make an impact, then yeah, I think he fits directly in that category.
Let me rephrase. One of the most exciting pickups, like Kalen DeBoer did not really get this type of talent consistently when he was at Washington, right? It was all through the transfer portal. Yes, Austin Mack 2 years ago, Tayshawn Lyons, but Vines Bright, he's a high 3-star for us, 89, kid from Arizona. Now he's at IMG Academy. We'll see as these rankings play out. Saw him at the pro day. Love his tape, love his release. Still got a ways to go with the wide receivers. We're trying to stack that position. But, to me, I think this is a statement. And again, we talked about it on the show yesterday with Jedd Fisch, right? Is he a good, what are his chops as a recruiter? And then look what he did at Arizona. I don't know. I think we're going to come back to this Vines Bright commitment and be like, wow, this was kind of a big deal. Washington, to my knowledge, and I'm firing from the hip here, I don't think they've ever signed a kid out of IMG Academy. Like that doesn't happen. And, I just think this is a notable one. I like him a lot.
They almost did. A guy named Josh Delgado, Oregon fans would know that name. IMG Academy, I think it was originally a West Coast guy. Do you remember him?
Yes, I do. You're right.
Yeah.
Signed with Oregon, right?
Signed with Oregon. It was between Washington and Oregon. I was at UW. Certainly a guy that I think we were kind of evaluating in that number 3 spot. Ends up going to Oregon. Have to go back and take a look at if he was able to produce anything at all at Oregon. But yeah, interesting point there. I mean, the thing is I think you said it, it's like Jedd Fisch, his group, Matt Doherty, our friend up there, the director of player personnel up there in Seattle, like Jedd Fisch came out hot. He said he wanted to have the highest ranked recruiting class in program history at UW. I think the highest was 15. To me, that's doable, and the other thing about that is like, I'll say this from our end, we'll hold Jedd Fisch accountable, but in terms of what they've been able to do so far, what he's been able to do at Arizona, they've come out swinging, man. And I'm excited about Jedd Fisch and the Big Ten and kind of how they fit in. And I think similar to Arizona, I don't think it's going to yield results until really year 3, right? They got some work to do. That roster is certainly in a place where they're in rebuild mode.
I had it written down yesterday. I don't even know if I got to it on the show. Like, isn't there over/under win total at like 8.5? I was surprised by that. 30% of their offensive production coming back, but I think the schedule is kind of soft to begin.
Yeah, I got to take a look at that. 8.5 is a lot. I'm surprised by that number. I'm surprised by 8.5 for Arizona as well. Got to do some more digging on that.
I'm on the MacBook.
Okay. All right, we said we were going to talk about the transfer portal right now. It's time to talk about the portal.
7.5 for Washington. Weber State, or is it Weber State? Weber State?
Let's go with Weber.
Eastern Michigan, Washington State, Northwestern, at Rutgers. That's their first 5.
Weber State, Damian Lillard. Shout out there. All right, let's talk about the portal a little bit. One of those names that certainly has popped, and this one's interesting. You and I and the rest of the scouting team had some conversations about, how do we, I don't want to say course correct, but, we're in evaluation mode ourselves, right? Especially when it comes to the portal, especially when it comes to NIL. It's a new age of college football. And ultimately, at the end of the day, how do we do our job better from the rankings and everything that's transpired over the last 2 years? What does that look like? And then what does that look like for us path forward, and maybe how we implement that into our process? And the name that's a really good example of that, Cormani McClain at the top, right? And this was a guy, 5-star corner out of Florida in Lakeland. Certainly, if you remember, pretty crazy recruitment. Miami, Alabama, all involved, Florida as well. He ends up at Colorado under Deion Sanders. I've said it. I went on air. I think we knew that going into it, this was going to be a guy that was going to need a presence like Deion Sanders in his life. And I said, if it didn't work out under Colorado and Deion Sanders, I was going to have a lot of questions about the trajectory of his career. And Drew, that's where we are right now. I think he played in 4 games last year. He actually showed some flashes. But Cormani McClain, I mean, as a number 14 player, as a number 2 corner, I don't think it's ever been about ability with Cormani McClain. But now you look at him kind of as an example, and there's a lot of other examples to go with Cormani McClain where you're like, all right, how do we really kind of balance everything we know about Cormani McClain, what transpired in his recruitment? How do we bake that into the cake? And what I mean by that is, like, this is a guy, if you ask people around Miami, and people around Miami know this, I mean, he snubbed Miami, right? When they came and saw him at his school, there were things that you would characterize as red flags all around Cormani McClain. So just over a little bit of a year and a half later, Cormani McClain is in the portal. And now, Drew, you and I, rest of the scouting team, you kind of go back to the drawing board and you say, all right, it's a good case study. How do we recalibrate, or how does this really kind of impact what we do going forward?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I mean, we've been discussing it behind the scenes. I think the signs were all there. Tools, 19 interceptions in a 2-season span, 4.5 on the lasers in the 40-yard dash, 128-inch broad jump. I think that would rank in the top 5 at the NFL scouting combine. 4.3 in the short shuttle. Obviously, he is long. It's never been about the pure athletic ability. It has been the between the ears type of stuff. I think that has been the question for us. Coop, you brought this up this morning, and I totally forgot about it. Remember when Miami sent their entire staff to Lakeland High School and he wasn't there? That was kind of a foreshadow of what's next. Or how about when he had BYU in his top 5 at some point? That was a bit of a head scratcher to us. I went back to like one of the first stories I wrote on Cormani before I think things just spiraled out of control in terms of, I don't want to say it's him or his camp. Like, he just got a little too big. And how do you weigh that in the rankings? It's a great question when we're just trying to project down the line. Something we're going to continue to marinate on. I will say, this is what I wrote in his scouting report that is front facing. Must learn how to block out mistakes and find some inner confidence once adversity hits, but has the physical makeup of a potential impact player for a college football playoff contender and possible early round NFL drafts selection. Could experience some initial growing pains, but freakish traits are worth molding for the long haul. I want to get one other thing out right now. Polk County, where Cormani McClain is from, is going through an epic stretch of washouts. It is not good. So you have Cormani, Keon Zipper, who was a top 247 tight end time with Florida, Lloyd Summerall, top 247 pass rusher, maybe high 3-star. He went to Florida. Sam McCall out of Lake Gibson, DeMarcus Bowman, Arian Smith at Georgia. I know he's been dinged up. I don't know. I ran this by a few different people that recruit the area. It just seems like these guys are getting to the next level and they're not finding success right away. I think every one of those guys I mentioned besides Arian Smith has transferred. And it's an interesting trend.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's not it's not just that one pocket, right? I mean, you could go back and I could tell you every move that we've made in the top 247 with some of the 5 stars of one where you put your head on the pillow at the end of the night. Like, let's go back and take a look just off the top of my head, right? Keontae Goodwin was certainly one, signed with Kentucky, coming out, was at Florida, transferred out of Florida. You think about Anthony Lucas, was signed at Texas A&M, now at USC. There was some chatter about him coming out from a character standpoint. Chris Marshall, right? Texas A&M, the Ole Miss Flames out there quickly, now at Boise State. You think about some of the guys at A&M, Smoke Bowie being another one, right? Not a 5-star, but certainly in the top 247. Denver Harris, A&M, cup of coffee at LSU, big expectations. They need him to play. That's something that you have to balance out. And in terms of how it affects us in the rankings, here's the biggest difference, right? It's hard to apply that same standard or investment in terms of character background player 1 through 247. And they're able to do this at the NFL level because, one, it's a billion-dollar industry. And this is really the job of an area scout. As much as people like to believe, there's a big scouting component of being a scout. There is a huge psychological behavior component of what these guys do and who they talk to when they go to practices, when they go to campus, from the NFL liaison to the position coaches, to the coordinators, to the head coach, to the nutritionist, right? All the way to the janitors. Any type of intel information that they can get on what type of player and what type of people these guys are, that's huge information. The other thing at the collegiate level is you're able to be able to cut your losses relatively soon, right? If it wasn't working out with Cormani McClain, I'm sure there was a lot of conversations that happened between Deion Sanders and Cormani in his camp that said, it's probably best for the both of us to move on here. And as of right now, it's pretty interesting to see, like, 2 names that came up this morning, USC, South Florida. But you think about LSU, and it's like, LSU just went through this with Denver Harris. They have a huge need at corner. But are they going to go back?
What about Alabama?
I'm just using well, no, you're right. It's the same example that you can apply for multiple programs, right? And the other thing is like the character piece, especially when you get to dollars and cents in the world that we live in, is going to continue to be more and more prevalent, I think, in the evaluation process in terms of who are we investing in, right? Because we don't want to wear the egg on our face at the end of the day. If when the going gets hard, hey, we're going to pull the plug and we're going to go look at our options somewhere else. So there is no shortage of examples of us seeing this happens. And as it applies to our rankings, I think it's something now that we used to say, like me 2 years ago. It's like, hey, let's bet on the athlete, and they figure it out. They figure it out. And if they don't, it is what it is. At least we missed on the right type of physical characteristics. I don't think in my right mind you can apply that same level of thinking going forward, right? So it's going to be interesting, and I think in an industry, quite honestly, that has a really hard time dinging 17 and 18-year-olds, and I completely understand that because they're going through adolescence themselves, but the environment is so important in terms of how these young men develop and who's around them. And who's going to be their mentor and what does that look like, right? So, yeah, I mean, this is, a lesson learned, not just Cormani, but I mean, what I named like 5-6 examples of, other guys. And I didn't even tap into a whole list of others out there, that was just off the dome.
I was going to say, you just rattled them off. Remember Cormani's initial commitment as well? I was in like Lakeland, Florida for that. Everyone thought he was going to Florida, and then he picked Miami, and he had to do the whole thing again because no one believed him. I mean, you always bring it up from when your days in the personnel side. They kind of show you who they are in the recruitment.
Yeah, it's a famous Chris Peterson line, recruits tell you who they are. You just got to listen to them. And if you recruit these guys for a long enough time, 2 years, whatever it is, 2-3 years, you get a pretty good idea of who they are. Peyton Kirkland one is interesting. Committed to Texas without ever taking a visit. You know, I mean, these are things that just kind of add up. You can see the breadcrumbs, right? So those are all things that I think you and I, the rest of the team, is going to continue to pay attention to. And sometimes the talent is so intoxicating that you have to kind of balance it out. But it's pretty interesting that way. So
what do you think about market for him? Where does he land?
I think he's hurt himself, man. I really do. He's been in the public eye for so long. His recruitment was kind of crazy. I think Miami was willing to look past a lot of things. And, you know, I said this, right? Like, you're getting an education from a Hall of Famer, a gold jacket. You say whatever you want about Deion Sanders, but Deion Sanders made that very personal when he recruited Cormani McClain. He got him there that, all right, he was going to expend whatever resources that he needed to make that one work. And if you can't take it from him, who's going to get to you? Who's going to make you realize that this is so real? You know, and if you don't get your act together quickly, it's not just Deion Sanders that's going to say, hey, you know what? Maybe this isn't the right fit. Look around, man. You know, maybe USC is in one of those positions where they're like, hey, we got to take this guy and we got to figure it out. But USF, like, I get it. Van Dyke's over there, right? He's a guy that's very, very close with him. If I was in Cormani's corner, that's probably where I would tell him to go. Like, if that's the one guy that can get to you, and you feel like you need to be in an environment to continue to kind of like humble yourself and build yourself back up, there should be no expectations for Cormani McClain and his personal self. I mean, he's starting from zero, in my opinion. So
yeah, I mean, the messages I've gotten, I don't know what the market is, and it's because of exactly what you said. It is certainly damaged. He was at an all-time high at some point. He is nowhere close to that right now.
Yeah. Well, if you can't produce and you're a headache, why do I want you on my team?
Hey, here's the other thing I just remembered. Like, missed multiple Under Armour All-America game practices.
Yeah. I often tell everybody, you know, on our team is like, document everything and everything that we do off the field stuff. You go to a combine, body language, you know, one of these guys tap out, maybe it's a lower body extremity. It's good on good. It's the first time we've seen him. And some of these guys say, you know what, I'm good. All those little things add up to the big picture of how to put the puzzle pieces together ultimately at the end of the day. So pretty interesting there. And Drew, I mean, just to stay along the lines of the general conversation, all these guys from Florida, Tyler Williams, Nigel Kelly, Jason Zandamela. Zandamela seems to be in a little bit different of a conversation bucket.
All right, we want to talk about him here in a second?
Yeah, let's talk about him right now. The number 46 player in the 2024 cycle, number one interior offensive lineman from Clearwater, Florida, originally from where? Mozambique?
Yeah. I'm going back to a conversation yeah, he was at Clearwater Academy International. I had a bunch of friends over. Funny conversation about Clearwater. He was at CAI. This is a kid that's only been playing football for 2 years now. Came from Mozambique, like you said, rugby background. Obviously we like him. Number one IOL. I don't think he's the same case as Cormani. I have heard the market for Zamandela is very, very fruitful. I expect him fully to land at an SEC program. I think he's going to be close to home. And I think if that were to happen, I still feel optimistic about Zamandela. I think the reason why he's leaving USC is he is just so far from his base there in Clearwater. And then, you know, it's a 14-hour flight to where he grew up. So Coop, I don't know what you've heard on him. We didn't expect him to play year one, but I believe he was pushing for some playing time, or at least in the 2 deep at USC as a true freshman.
Sounds like 4 programs, at least from what I've been able to piece together. It sounds like Florida, Georgia for sure, Florida State, and Miami.
I've heard UCF. I've heard UCF as well.
Yeah, Miami's interesting. You know, obviously Mario and Alex Mirabal really invested in the offensive line. You and I kind of talked about it on the show yesterday. like Florida is one of those groups that I think needs to get right on the offensive line. Zandamela is interesting because he's got guard, center versatility. He's a prototype. He's exactly what you like. Like, I love this kid. He hasn't been playing football for very long, but his floor is already exceptionally high. He's fascinating. He goes to USC. You know, when Zandamela came out and went to USC, it was a little bit of a shocker, and I was kind of like, I don't know if I like that fit long term, right? So now we kind of get to see what that looks like. Stacey Searles at Georgia, Alex Atkins at Florida State, Mirabal at Miami. Like, got some really, really good options. You know, Florida's the one that's fascinating, but I don't know. I kind of wonder, like, I don't know specifically about his situation, but I wonder if Bear Alexander testing the market, then coming back to USC, which just makes me think that he asked for more money. They gave it to him. And then all of a sudden you saw some departures out of LA, right? So sometimes that stuff tends to have a little bit of a ripple effect, but it could be just as easy as that he wants to be closer to home. I don't know if there's one fit out of those four. I kind of like all four of them, quite honestly, for him. So we'll see.
The Florida one's the one I kind of have circled, right? Potential center. You got some other guys there on the interior. They can move to the guard spots. You know, maybe Jason Zamandela saw how DJ Lagway looked in the orange and blue game over the weekend. I don't know. Florida, it's 2 hours from Clearwater. I think that's the one you got to watch.
Guys, we have 330 people watching on YouTube. Those are some big numbers right now. 11:48 Central Time. We appreciate it. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, smash that like button as well. Drew, another name I wanted to talk to you about, because I think you and I weren't split, but I think you saw it a lot more clear than I did because of where you were. And obviously this was in your region, but Tyler Williams, you know, former top 247 player, number 17 receiver, signs with Georgia. Type of profile that we really liked, right? Basketball player, dynamic athlete, but the production was a big question mark. It was really never there. And this was kind of like a calculated roll of the dice. Williams, to me, was one of those guys we had at 111, which would be top end of the fourth round, right? But if it all came together, it's one of those guys like you don't know how high he can go. But now, just a year after he enrolled at Georgia, he's in the portal. Kind of interested to kind of just get your thoughts on. I don't want to speak for you, but I wouldn't be shocked if you're not surprised at this at all.
Yeah, and I was trying to recall this last night in my head. He didn't participate in the Under Armour game because I think he went to bowl practices with Georgia, right? And I think if we had saw him in that setting, I don't know if he finishes at 111. And you're right, Cooper. He was a former quarterback, transitions to wide receiver, like 20 catches as a junior, 33 as a senior, and maybe the quarterback play wasn't the best. You know, he was just kind of one of the top athletes on the field. I think the big question for us was true top end gear, but he had a 6'1", 6'2" frame, you know, good coordination, could win on the perimeter. And you're right, we rolled the dice. In hindsight, would we do it again? I don't know. I mean, having went and saw him play as a senior, I think everything you need to know. And I had a school reach out to me last night and ask about Tyler Williams because he has no footage from Georgia. I think he's played like a handful of snaps, and someone asked for my opinion. I think it says a lot that he didn't break through there in 2 seasons.
I mean, I'm not shocked. I mean, he was kind of like a developmental upside type of guy, right? And I wouldn't be shocked if maybe he finds a soft landing spot and can do some things, right? So we'll see what happens with him. The last one here, Nigel Kelly, Drew, former top 100 player, 2022. We talked about him on the broadcast yesterday. It was a big win for Mario, and I still maintain like Nigel Kelly kind of filled out his role for Mario Cristobal, right? It was a huge perception win when Mario came over from Oregon to Miami, but now Nigel on the market, and it doesn't seem like the market would be what you would think for a former top 100 pass rusher who checks a lot of boxes physically. Yeah.
I got clipped by the social team saying, I think, you know, if you're an SEC school, you should look. Some staffer was like, no. I'm like, okay, well, let's put you in the chair and not know that question's coming. I talked about it on the show. He's got shoulder injuries, and I was right. It is multiple shoulder injuries, and I think that derailed his development a little bit there at Miami. And I think he's just asking for too much. I don't know where he's going to land. I also said it on the show that I heard a group of 5 school thought they were going to get him on campus. So that's where we're at in terms of his market right now. But the tools are there on the younger side. Sometimes it just doesn't all come together.
Yeah, if you don't have the pieces to the puzzle, especially from a medical standpoint, there's going to be a big range on terms of maybe where we see him, some confusion of why he's in the portal to begin with, or where you talk to some teams and say, hey, well, this would be a tough one for us to kind of pull the trigger on.
All right. Any names in the portal that have entered? Like, I feel like we just talked negative on so many guys, but like people you're just fired up about. Do you have any names?
Quite honestly, go ahead, rattle some off.
I'm gonna
speaking of unprepared questions.
Oh, I put that in the rundown. All right, this Eli Stowers kid from New Mexico State that's in the portal. He was when we ended the show yesterday. He was one of the top 10 available for 24/7 Sports. I'm all in on this kid. Okay, former quarterback, top 247, goes to New Mexico State because he transfers in from Texas A&M. They play him at wide receiver. I'm buying as much stock as I can get in this dude. He's got a crazy track and field background. I think he's supposed to visit Vandy. Barton Simmons, good friend of us here at 24/7 Sports, is probably pissed that I keep hyping him up, but he's one name where I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm fired up about this guy. And then Coop, I talked about this individual previously on our one of the editions of our shows. It might have been Preps to Pros, might have been Oyster Boyz Radio, but Zachary Toby, corner at Illinois, started 3 games as a freshman, 6'1" corner, played really well. He entered yesterday. That flew completely under the radar. You think about all the teams out there that need corner help. I wonder, if someone's been working the back channels with him, and no one's really written anything about him yet, but a kid out of Central Florida, played as a freshman, has the tools. Those are 2 that are completely out of left field that fire me up.
I don't know if it was just because I was in the host chair yesterday or what, but there's, as we're doing the show, there wasn't really one that came to mind. Jacoby Matthews, from Texas A&M. What's interesting about him, he can't transfer to another SEC program. Oregon's been linked to him. I'm sure we'll have a hot market as well, just with a highly touted defensive back coming out, who's actually has some starting experience. But outside of that, man, there was nothing that really kind of like caught my eye and was like, sure. We're going to talk about Damen Martinez and some of these guys, receiver for Penn State, but there was no like, oh, that's kind of sneaky,
What about what do you think the market is for Jakuri Brown transferring out of Miami?
I don't know. I don't know enough about his situation. And, I know his name has kind of come up. It's pretty interesting to see. Like, that just seems to be like a disconnect between what's happening behind the scenes and maybe what a team like Miami thinks of Jakuri Brown, what his market is in actuality, versus how the player is perceived just by the general audience, if that makes sense.
I think, and I said this in the control room, I think if you're one of these schools out here that has an established quarterback, okay, so you know who your starter is in 2024, but you're going to have a battle in 2025, and you got some young guys in there. I would roll the dice on Jakuri Brown, and obviously, you're going to have to pay a price to get him. That's one of the primary reasons why he's stuck at Miami. He has said that on podcasts, but he has started 3 games, right? So, and he has flashed in those games. Like, put him on the roster, try to develop him, get him in a battle at some point down the line. But, if worse comes to worse, he's someone that has some game experience, like, break glass and you're not rolling out a true freshman if you're a college football playoff contender, like a Brock Glenn. I don't know. I'm not selling stock in him. My player comp was always Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker had to transfer and reboot his career. So that's just my take on Jakuri.
What about Georgia Tech? They got Haynes King there, right, for another year, and then he's out.
Yeah, but Georgia Tech has like recruited that quarterback position kind of well recently. They took 2 high school kids last year. The kid out of South Lake Carroll, Aaron Philo, who's one of the most prolific passers ever in the Peach State, and then they got my guy Grady Adamson committed here, and yeah, that's a good one. I think he would fit that offense.
All right, let's get to Elite 11 recap. Drew, we're almost at an hour. I have no idea how. Boys have just been catching up. Elite 11 Orlando recap. You and I haven't really talked about it. So I'm going to just kind of give you the runway to kind of loose rundown here, hit on the guys that you want to talk about, and make sure that, those who know what are the names to know coming out of the event.
Yeah, I mean, Elite 11, that was Sunday in Orlando. It feels like it was a week ago. First regional, they didn't hand out any Elite 11 invites, but Brian Stump, who heads up the Elite 11, he reminded all the kids. I think their Dallas regional last year, they didn't invite anyone at the conclusion, and then ended up picking 4 guys for the Elite 11 finals. It was it's a smaller group, and I don't think Florida is known for its quarterbacks, but my pushback to that would be the Sunshine State could have 6 guys selected in the NFL draft next week. Michael Penix, Joe Milton, Michael Pratt, Jordan Travis, Austin Reed, all those kids, Carter Bradley are all from Florida. So it's a sneaky good quarterback state. Carter Smith, the Michigan commit, was the headliner. He's someone that committed to Jim Harbaugh back during the fall months. He has stuck by his pledge to the Wolverines, and that coaching transition sounds like he's all in on Michigan. And, he's the reigning Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Florida. He's at Bishop Verot in a lower classification. He had a rough start to the camp, but he got better as it went on. A guy that has a baseball background, and I think at times that kind of messes him up from a mechanical standpoint. But in terms of throwing on the move, I thought he did some things, and he got hot late, and he could easily just kind of mailed it in. So I thought it was a strong showing for Carter Smith. I would anticipate him to once again put up big numbers here as a senior, and we'll see. I mean, he could end up getting that Elite 11 finals invitation, but I view him kind of developmental guy, still has to improve with the mechanics and as a passer, but get the take for Michigan, especially after Jaden Davis. So he was like the one senior Cooper to know. And then this group of underclassmen, really 3 guys. You have Noah Grubbs out of Lake Mary High School. You have Brady Hart out of Cocoa. And then you have Darion Coleman out of Orlando Jones. And it's funny. They all train with the same guy in Orlando, and they're all really good friends. So I know Notre Dame and Ohio State, like some of these schools are all fighting for the same quarterback, Noah and Brady Hart. And I was messing around with them. I'm like, I don't think fans realize that you guys are like really, really good friends. And maybe that'll change at some point down the line. But just messing with them about their decisions. I think Notre Dame is in a good spot, and I'm stealing Tom Loy's juice here with Brady Hart. But keep an eye on Florida there. We were talking about Florida. He's got family ties to the Gators. I thought out of the 3, he was my favorite that day. He led Cocoa to a state title there. He's 6'4", 185 pounds, built really well, kind of an elongated release, but he can get it around the yard. Also has a baseball background. I thought he did some good things. Noah Grubbs, Ohio State, I mentioned, Florida, all these schools are in on him. Big numbers as a sophomore. Mechanically, he is in tune. Guy that has completely reworked his body. It's been really impressive. He has leaned out, dealing with some back tightness, but it was a solid showing for him. I think both those guys could very well be in our top 247, which comes out next week. And then finally, Darion Coleman. He is a polarizing quarterback prospect. He's probably 5'10", 150 pounds, but he had the livest arm out of anyone in attendance. He just whips it around the field, like ball jumps out of his hands. Cocky individual. He was like wearing like a ski mask as he did this whole workout, which is pretty on brand for Florida. But he showed some things, and I think Oklahoma's in a good spot with him. He just visited in Norman, going to get back this summer. Seems to really like what they got going on there at OU. And just from an arm standpoint, you don't look at the frame, like he can make the throws. So he's certainly a name to know as well.
Heck of a recap, brother. I wish I could volley with you on most of these guys, but that was a really good rundown. All right. We are an hour plus into the show. And also I got a promo. How about all the promos yesterday, man? Big promo yesterday, 60% off at 247sports.com. Annual subscriptions. I still believe that promo is alive and well until 12 o'clock Eastern time tonight, midnight. So make sure you get over to do that. Also, we got the 24/7 Sports Live. That will be on Thursday, 5 o'clock Eastern time. Make sure you tune in to that. All right, time for questions, Drew. Let's get to it, brother. I know the answer to this question already. And the answer to the question is that we don't have the answer, but maybe we can play the personnel side. Any insight to Damen Martinez's destination? I know there are a lot of Miami fans on here always. Miami involved, I believe Kentucky involved, Ole Miss involved. I think 2 other teams involved, but from what I read, it sounds like he's going to take visits. So I don't think this is going to be one that's going to be done immediately.
Yeah, but Miami's got to be the favorite, right?
I would say Ole Miss.
Okay. Well, I was talking with Chris Hummer in the.
I mean, they could be the team most needy, in my opinion. Could be Ole Miss.
Right. I was talking with Chris Hummer, who does an excellent job for 24/7 Sports in the transfer portal. Me and him, I was actually probably bothering him yesterday. He thought Miami was in a good spot, and then he said Mississippi State, but Mississippi State just got the kid out of Miami of Ohio. Coop, this is not answering the question. But hear me out here. If you're a running back, would you just try to play at another school every year? Like just play like 3 schools in 4 years?
Why?
The position is devalued in the NFL. Running backs
just banking as much money as possible.
Just saying.
I mean, yeah, not the worst idea, but I don't know. I mean, I'm all for continuity. You know,
well, the running backs are the most.
If you're Martina, it just depends. The only thing you start to play with fire a little bit, you go into a new room, you just don't know what it's going to look like, right?
Counter to that would be, it seems we can always bring it up. Running backs are the most plug and play type of guys out there. How many true freshmen are making an impact? I'm just saying, if there's one position where, hey, you can show up in June or July and carve out a role, it seems to be running back.
All right. We'll see what happens with Damen Martinez. He seems to be the one guy on the board. Davin Hayden, the other guy from Ohio State, that teams are zeroed in on contenders at the running back position. A lot of these contenders still trying to find a running back. That seems to be the one position group where it's like, I don't know. I kind of want to go back and study. Has there just been a high volume of turnover? What is it that's kind of causing that ripple effect? All right. Rod Smith asks, I know you guys are talking portal. Any news on Ryan Montgomery? Has UGA overtaken the Gators in the Gamecocks? Rod, we talked about Ryan Montgomery a little bit earlier in the show. As of right now, 100% of the crystal ball is on Georgia. That decision comes at 3 p.m. Eastern time on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. So if you want to check it out, and if there's any surprises, that's where it would be. But as of right now, it seems like Georgia is in the lead there. From Armando, he asked, why does Miami have such a hard time recruiting top quarterbacks out of high school? It's an interesting question. I mean, the last couple have been who they take this the quarterback out of Georgia? Judd Anderson, Emory Williams before that. Since Shannon Dawson's been there, they seem to have like an infatuation with like a prototypical build, but with developmental upside that is untapped. I mean, Anderson and Emory Williams are both pretty similar guys. Jakuri Brown was an interesting one. I believe previous staff, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I saw this question in the chat. I thought it was pretty interesting. The thing about taking a transfer portal quarterback, and hitting on a transfer portal quarterback, it seems to just open the door for you to continue to do that time and time again. And where, teams can then be like, well, I've seen it. I've seen the formula for success. And it sounds like everybody's betting big on Cam Ward. Cam Ward, arguably my favorite player in the portal this year. I and that's not saying a lot. But if he has that a lot of people think he can make, I mean, what's from stopping Mario to say, look at the roster we have. Look at what we've done. Cam Ward's going to go be a first-round draft pick, right? That would be the ideal scenario. You win 10-plus games. You compete for the ACC championship. Maybe you get a CFP appearance. And Cam Ward, the ultimate beneficiary, can hear his name called early in the NFL draft. Now, all of a sudden, Miami becomes a destination spot, right? And you think about Oregon, I mean, it's Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, and it's Dante Moore. Right. And almost 60% of FBS starters are transfer quarterbacks. Like, more than likely, that's just kind of the day and age that we live in. I think Miami after this, I think you can see Miami with a run over the next 2 to 3 years on top transfer portal arms. And I think that's where they're going to live. It kind of suits them, in my opinion.
I think, I don't know if the question is stemming from Jakuri entering, but I think the staff turnover there has certainly affected things. And you know, when Diaz was there, it's not like he's an offensive coach. Then you got Rhett Lashley. I mean, it's just a revolving door. And with a lot of these high-profile quarterbacks, you got to think, I mean, they're making decisions as in advance of junior seasons. Like that's a long-term type of relationship deal. And Shannon Dawson, I know, you know, he's done a bunch of things, but it wasn't like when he was at Houston, he was kind of making those inroads with the high profile arms. And then, you know, the state of Florida, I just brought it up earlier. Yeah, man, like it's churning out quarterbacks, but not a lot of those guys are of the high profile variety in the high school ranks.
All right. Rod Smith asked another question. He says, so do the Gators pivot to Antoine Hill?
This is a great question. What do you think they should do?
I don't know. I mean, maybe it depends. You know, I'm kind of interested to see what happens with Keelan Russell. I mean, as of now, KJ Lacey's still sticking with Texas, right? Keelan seems to be that guy that is, I want to say open for business, but definitely kind of reviewing his options. And I think he's going to have his pick of the litter. I wonder if Florida goes and makes a run at him. You know, before I would pivot to Antoine Hill, I'd probably kick the tires on Keelan Russell and kind of see where he's at.
I would do the same. Heard yesterday, Ole Miss was a team to watch with Keelan Russell. That did come up in my. If Florida, I believe Keelan's supposed to visit in June. I believe he's supposed to. There's an official visit there in June. I would push my chips in on that, and then I think you have Antoine Hill. You recruit both of them. That's what I would do.
Pretty short answer, but a good answer, an efficient answer. We like that. Drew, are you familiar with Joshua Moore?
I am. I saw that question in the chat.
Okay, you ready for it?
Yeah.
Canes Cats, Heat 305. Appreciate you having back. He asked, two-parter for Andrew. How high can West Broward receiver Joshua Moore rise this offseason? He also didn't play most of his junior year. What will matter more, testing or senior film?
Yeah, I knew this question was going to – well, I know what this question stems from. I mean, Josh Moore shot up big yesterday or earlier in the week for someone in their rankings. You know, he was my alpha dog of the UA Miami. He is a big featured wide receiver, like massive mitts, projectable frame. You know, I've seen him play in person and have a ton of success. I think it was West Broward versus Belen Jesuit back in the spring. It was the game that served as the appetizer for Jeremiah Smith and JJ or Josiah Schrader. You know, I think he's a top 247 candidate. We're trying to figure out this wide receiver board right now. You know, there's a lot of names kind of on that back end. Haven't pulled it up. I meant to pull it up yesterday. I do not think Joshua Moore, you know, tested exceptionally well at that Under Armour camp. Now, he was good in drills and whatnot. So we'll see. I mean, we're going to have to eventually hedge our bet on some of these wide receivers. I like him, you know, but he's not a multi-sport guy. You know, not saying that's the end-all be-all, certainly in any way, but he's not a track kid, not a basketball kid. But I've seen him produce it against top competition, so I'm not really worried about that department with him.
All right, last one here. Living rent-free in UT says, what are your thoughts on linebacker Elijah Barnes' commitment to Texas?
I'm giving this one to you.
This dude can roll. I had the linebacker room. He's a pretty interesting guy, more straight line, speed and space, dynamic. Short area. There's some question marks, but in terms of like the physical toolkit and what he is, love the athletic clay. Really love the speed. It's hard to find guys that have that type of verified time at the linebacker position. I think Texas was smart to get ahead of this one because I think this was probably going to be a guy that is, for us. I just know our taste. I know our profile. A guy that we're going to do a lot of due diligence on and come back around on, and that we like a lot, quite honestly. So,
Coop, you there?
Overall, yeah. Sorry, you got me. Probably means it's time to go relatively soon. But I love what Texas is doing on the defensive end in terms of upgrading their speed and their talent, their athleticism. All right, Drew. Internet's cutting out. It's that time of the day. Hour 10 into the show. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, man. I'm headed to the Elite 11 Ohio this weekend. Ready to see Tavian St. Clair, the Ohio State commit. And then just these names in the portal, man. More are popping up. I think there's some hidden gems out there that you got to be a true kind of nerd to find. But it has also been fun to see the guys that enter, and I texted you guys all this, right? The ones you fought so many people over, and then they enter the portal and you pull up the bio and it's like appeared in 8 games on special teams. It's like, yeah, that makes your morning a little bit better.
Yeah, a little bit more conviction going forward, right? As it plays out. The transfer portal definitely, I don't know, it makes people see the light a little bit sooner, I kind of feel like. Right, just in terms of return on investment. So, guys, speaking of nerds, if you've been on this show for an hour or 12 minutes, a little golf clap for you. We have gotten into weeds today, everything from the transfer portal to high school. We appreciate you guys stopping by as always. And if you're on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, I'm going to say it one more time. It helps the boys. It really does. We can go to our boss here at 24/7 Sports to see how many likes we got, see how many subs we got. Make sure to do that. And we will be back next week. No Tuesday show yesterday because of the transfer portal palooza. Trying to figure out what went down yesterday. Make sure to go watch that on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. For Andrew Ivins, Cooper Petagna, have a great rest of your week. See you next Tuesday.